We're just going to give it just a moment here. We're just giving everyone a couple more minutes to join in before we get started. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. That number is trickling in. Probably about 2 minutes, so just sit here and stare at us until we're ready to start talking.
Get a free Pepsi ad.
Sponsored by.
I wish.
On my way in, I was trying to think of some energy jokes, but I couldn't think of anything that were worth sharing. Vitaly's shaking his head. Thank God.
Thank God. No. All right. I think we should start, Nick. It's
Sure.
10.
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Thanks for coming. We'd like to welcome you to today's webinar hosted by Qcells. Today's webinar is part of a series that we've put together, and we're going to talk about everything under the sun, from IRA to M&A to PPA. All the acronyms will be touched and talked about, but probably not defined. We're getting into these topics that are so hot for so many of us right now. Our webinar is hosted by Vitaly Lee, who's the Chief Development Officer at Qcells. Vitaly has been powering energy transition through renewable development for over 20 years. We also have Dino Barajas, and he's the chair of Global Project Finance at BakerBots. And Dino, pardon me, is closing deals when failure is not an option. We're really excited to have Dino here today. And before I have Vitaly take over, I have a couple quick housekeeping items. Just want to reiterate that the views shared today are Vitaly and Dino's only, and this isn't legal advice. This session will be recorded, and I will send it in the follow-up following the conclusion of this webinar. We do have a Q&A scheduled near the end, so please put your questions in the Q&A and or in the chat, wherever it works for you, and we'll do our best to get through these as we go through the talk today. If you have specific legal questions, please reach out to Dino and his team directly. Lastly, we're going to kick it off with a short poll. And there's a couple short questions, so just take a quick second to answer it, and we'll talk about them here, and then we'll kick off the conversation. So let me get that ready to go. So the poll is up. The first one is just to get to know who's on the call. What's the primary function of your organization that you're a part of? The second one, I think you can go through on your own leisure, but the second one is how comfortable are you understanding the impacts of IRA to your projects? And the last one is just how many years of experience in renewable energy do you have? And Dino, Vitaly, can you all see what we have for the polls? All right, we'll give it a second here. I'm wondering if I can share it after. Right now, we have about 40% who are saying they're in the development selection, and we have some consultants and some IPPs. And then for how comfortable you are, it's from lease, it's about 15% uncomfortable, and about a tie between neutral and comfortable for how comfortable you are with the IRA. And then for the experience, we have a pretty good mix. We have about 36% who have less than 5 years, 44% who are between 5 and 10 years, and about 20% who are 10 years and over in experience. Just kind of giving it one last look if anything drastic has changed, which it really hasn't. I'm gonna end the poll in just a second here, and then I think I can share the results actually.
Cool. You can see it.
I'll give a second for you all to take a look, and then I'll stop sharing and we can kick it off here. So let me just close this out. So with that, I'll hand it over to Vitaly to take over the conversation. Thank you so much for everyone to join today, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Talk to you all in a little bit.
Thank you, Nick. Well, Dino, welcome. Audience, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Vitaly Lee. This is our third in a series of hopefully a lot of webinars where we try to address all the pertinent items that all of us developers, practitioners, consultants, lawyers are dealing with on a daily basis in our exciting world of renewable energy. Thank you for joining from your hotel room and making yourself available to us while you're traveling in Austin. Safe travels back home later today after a successful conference. So you and I have known each other, I would say, north of 15 years. Obviously, you are a well-recognized commodity in our space. You've worked with a lot of developers, and I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to engage you in this webinar. Anything you want to say at this point?
No, thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Great, thanks. So why don't we just start maybe a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you are the global chair of energy practice at Baker Botts. Can you share your journey from the crosstown rival for me from UCLA to becoming the global chair? What was it like?
I was at UCLA back when it used to be considered a party school. So there were literally two groups of people that were attending. Those that were living in the catacombs of the engineering and science libraries, and then the other half that were enjoying life, and especially life back then in the late 80s in Los Angeles. Thankfully, I lived a double life, so I had friends that I would study with constantly during the week, and then the other half that I'd go explore LA with on the weekends. But I had the opportunity to go to Harvard Law School. Went to Harvard, very different from the environment at UCLA, the weather especially, but also just kind of the mentality of the professors there, challenging you at every turn. When I graduated, I went to work for Ed Fio, who a number of people in the market know, friend, mentor for 10 years. That's where I learned failure was never an option. Taking
That's
on
great.
the tough projects and working day and night to get them done. But it was a great team to learn with, and most importantly, a great mentor to learn from. So to this day, I credit him for a lot of my success in law. And I've been blessed with a number of clients. As Vitaly mentioned, I'm the global chair for project finance at Baker Botts, but also doing a lot of M&A, private equity investment, and development work early on. So, we're taking projects cradle to grave, or, the better way to put it, inception to COD and beyond. But it's I think right now, a very exciting time in the market. There's a lot of capital out there, funding projects, chasing projects. And now, with 10 years of certainty, at least in terms of the tax environment, it's providing people, I think, with a great market to develop in, having that tax certainty and being able to move very large projects forward, knowing that the tax legislation isn't going to expire tomorrow, and are you going to get everybody behind the vote? Because I've also experienced times where tax legislation has expired and people are looking up, counting the tiles in their office, wondering what to do next.
Great. That's a great intro. I guess because of your practice and your experience, for those of you who just tuned in, we are planning to cover a wide spectrum of issues today. We're going to talk current M&A landscape. We're going to talk tax equity market, supply chain, ESG, tribal energy. Those are very important topics. So why don't we dig into the current M&A landscape? What are some of the current trends that you're seeing, in the M&A landscape of utility scale renewables?
Surely. Well, I would break them up into two different groupings. The first grouping, development rights, shovel-ready projects. They're the most active markets that we're seeing: California, ERCOT, and MISO. PJM, was more active right now. It seems to have slowed down, but at least the California market, extremely robust. ERCOT, being here in Texas, Yesterday, somebody was pointing out that there was a spike in the pricing, and I think it got up to $4,000 for a couple of hours. So, very interesting market. And if you're long, you're doing very well today. If you were short, it's a whole different ball game. And then MISO has gotten a lot of interest and activity here recently. Transmission access seems to be the critical element in development rights. So if you do have a queue position, you're golden. You're ahead of the pack. But then there are other projects that are in the process of trying to get queue position, and there it's a race to try to build out your pipeline and build out your bragawatts for the future, but also have those projects that are going to need more development runway and having projects for next year and the 10 years thereafter. Detailed due diligence is essential because you do have a lot of projects currently in the market, some more developed than others, but also a lot of kind of hidden issues for some projects. And because you are seeing a lot of frothiness in the market, the sellers are trying to get their money off the table and have nothing to do with the buyers going forward. So in some cases, what we're seeing is the limitation of survivability in terms of reps and warranties going forward after closing. So that makes due diligence that much more important, but it also makes the ability to secure rep and warranty insurance to the extent that it's been extreme enough that there may be no survivability, even though there are reps and warranties in your purchase and sale agreement. And the issue with reps and warranty insurance is that you do need to provide additional time for due diligence for the insurance provider. So, it's another layer of due diligence that goes on top of the seller's due diligence. And they're, just trying to get everyone comfortable with, what happens to be in the basket that you're buying is crucial in terms of pricing, what you're buying correctly, and more importantly, doing the balance between risk and reward. In terms of operating projects, there are a large number of operating portfolios that are currently in the market, and there seems to be a mixed bag. So valuation is all over the place. There are the gems thrown in the basket of projects with the less shiny gems that may need some reworking. And there, again, the issue is due diligence, making sure you're pricing everything correctly. And in some cases, sellers are best served by breaking up the portfolio of projects that they're trying to put out into the market, because not every jurisdiction is a target jurisdiction for certain buyers. You are seeing some of the private equity shops taking their bets off the table and trying to monetize the gains that they've had over the years. So there's an interesting market out there. But again, in terms of operating projects that are in the market, due diligence is key. Rep and warranty insurance is becoming more and more prevalent in the transactions that we're seeing. And because you are facing a lot of competition, speed is of the essence. Getting your due diligence done quickly, turning over every rock again, trying not to overpay, but pay what is merited by the assets, and then being able to move forward to the second and hopefully the final round as a winning bidder.
Right. You and I briefly talked about it before we started this webinar, that in this day and age, it's really what's market is what you get, right?
Exactly.
Some buyers, some sellers got what they wanted in previous transactions, and that's what they're aspiring to get in the next one. I think also as a buyer and a seller of projects all the time, it's very interesting to me. There's a lot of newcomers. There's a lot of dry powder out there, and so competition is fierce. I would attest to that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, in terms of what's market, it's whatever you saw on
Yeah,
your last deal, and we're able to negotiate. But the other thing for sellers to be very cognizant of is the market has changed quickly.
yeah,
So terms that were available 12 months ago may not be available from buyers today, simply because there are so many assets in the market. And the same thing goes, on the on the buy side. On the buy side, um, there's a lot to choose from. So if somebody is being a little bit too stubborn, or trying to hold the line and trying to hope, for the terms that they were able to command a year ago or a year and a half ago, they
right,
may be able to get that because they're, the buyers are having a lot of options. We see, a lot of deals come to market that aren't even being marketed very widely. So I always
right,
joke that I'm everyone's priest because everybody seems to whisper in my ear whether they want to buy projects or sell projects. And a lot of times we're able to match make buyers and sellers, off of the spotlight stage, and those deals get done quietly, and then you'll see them announced, or in some cases never see them announced.
right,
Those that are watching, any filings at FERC get to see the projects changing hands after the fact, but they're never widely announced, so you won't see it on
right,
Ecload or
right.
some of the other news services.
You mentioned earlier the slowdown in PJM. Why is that? Is that the interconnection queue, the
Exactly.
slowdown in M&A activity?
And that's exactly it. I mean, right now transmission is key. So those markets that are going to be able to solve their transmission issues are going to, bring to their markets, more investment. And as we're seeing in Texas, currently as we're seeing in California, whether it's the heat domes and spikes in demand, in magnitudes that we've never seen before.
Mhm.
Um, Having a reserve margin, having more generation than what's required today is going to be critical for those markets in terms of functioning, and not having price spikes in the market that ultimately are going to affect the end user. So, as policymakers take a look at how they're revamping their markets, what's critical to know is that they're not doing it for the benefit of generators. They're not doing it for the benefit of power marketers. They're doing it for the benefit of the end consumers.
Okay.
And now the end consumer, is being faced with economic challenges, whether it's inflation, is trying to stretch every dollar, and having price spikes in their electricity bills is probably not something that people are going to be able to stomach. So again, we go back to legislation, we go back to the policymakers. Changes in legislation isn't just to benefit the industry. It's to ultimately benefit economic development in their backyard, and more importantly, individual consumers.
Got it. So let's shift our focus a little bit to now tax equity. And tell me, with the IRA in play, I guess, what are you seeing on the supply demand balance side, and what is what's new in the
Well, in terms of tax equity, I mean, it's the I guess the curse of plenty. You have
Mhm.
plenty of projects looking for tax equity. You have some of the big players, whether it's Wells Fargo, Truist, or others, doing the big deals, and you have very well-heeled sponsors like yourselves, that have a lot of projects in the pipeline. You are able to go and shop essentially your deals for the best deal terms for tax equity investors. But the issue ends up being, with so many projects seeking tax equity at the same time and using the traditional tax equity model. And we'll get into some of the optionality with IRA in a moment. It's most important to get to a potential tax equity provider early, get your deal terms hammered out, not letting perfection be the enemy of getting something done.
Right.
Having closed a number of deals last year, and we're facing the same this year. Deals that weren't in the hopper by the end of Q3 weren't going to get done because the tax equity providers, just like project finance lenders, they have a certain bandwidth. Their teams, can only focus on so many deals, and they have the benefit of picking the better deals out in the market, the ones with the least amount of hair, with the biggest sponsors, those relationships that they want to keep coming back to their door. And unfortunately, smaller developers, smaller projects ended up having a very difficult time attracting interest from tax equity investors, either because their deals weren't big enough to really merit the attention. The larger deals were the ones getting done, mainly because the teams within the various sponsor groups had teed them up early. So even though they were closing at the end of the year, and I always know where my tax partners are going to be on December 31st, and it's usually on calls where everybody's hitting the button and doing everything else. But it's one thing that we've been telling everybody is get to your tax equity investors early, and hire the right advisors, because the other thing is speed is of the essence. What you don't want to do is sitting there trying to over negotiate your terms, and I think you have all the time in the world, because the world does change very quickly, and I think we saw that in the financing markets. We've seen that in other markets where things change very quickly, and if your deal is languishing because you have someone trying to reinvent a wheel because they haven't seen a wheel before, you're best off going with advisors that have been there, done that. In terms of optionality, and this is where IRA comes in. I mean, now we're starting to see brokers come into the market where they're matchmaking generators with non-traditional purchasers of the tax credits. So groups like Evergreen, that are brokering deals out there, are now an option. So you don't have to do the traditional tax equity structure. There are going to be other structures available, but there the issue is the due diligence that has to be done is that much more extreme, because the potential buyers that are out there don't want to face the risk, and because they may be new to the market, they want to check the box on something that is very straightforward, straight down the fairway. Nobody wants surprises. Nobody wants to go to their treasurer and tell them that they missed something, and unfortunately, I thought they were buying. They haven't done their homework. So I think there is going to be more time that needs to be dedicated to those types of deals. But on the positive side, sponsors are going to have more options.
That's good. That's good. I want to switch a little bit to supply chain. Obviously, we've been on this roller coaster for many years. I think things are trending up, and obviously there's a lot of announcements of domestic content supplies, Qcells including, in the very near future. I don't have the number right. It's over 10 gigawatts that has been announced. But how are you getting your clients? How are you working with them to mitigate the supply chain risks as they are working on their deals?
Well, first and foremost, domestic content is key. So if if you could get to that supply early, you're golden.
Right.
You all are in good position there with the new factory going up in Georgia and that big investment. But to the extent that you're not able to secure product made domestically, the one thing to note is where in the past you could try to claim force majeure when you had certain supply chain issues or trade sanctions and the like. The first time it's a surprise. So when you look at the force majeure definition in most contracts, something that was unavoidable, and then everybody argues unavoidable is and unforeseen, and that you're taking, all the mitigation efforts, that hopefully your lawyers put in there commercially reasonable. But in most cases, they don't put commercially reasonable, and it's, all mitigation efforts that are possible. And the issue with trying to now claim force majeure is it's not unexpected. It's not unforeseeable. You know that it's happened before. You know that it's happened numerous times.
Right.
So there, the issue is not only having plan A, but also plan B and C in mind. In your contracts, building in some of that optionality to make sure that if for whatever reason there is an issue in terms of supply chain, that you do have a backup plan, and most importantly that you have a backup plan to your backup plan. So those that have put their time, money, and effort into planning are the ones that are going to get their deals done, that are going to be in a position to reap the benefits in the market when there are issues. And we saw a lot of that where you had projects fall by the wayside when all the supply issues came up the last go around. Everybody was scrambling for alternative suppliers, and it was only those companies that were able to plan ahead and see what was coming in some ways. But also, the supply chain issues favor the larger sponsors, those that are able to kind of warehouse equipment and have the equipment ready for a rainy day, and essentially move equipment amongst projects, that are closer to final development, and then figure out what they're going to end up doing, with those projects that, lost their equipment. So it's almost like having a racing team, and, you have three cars, and you're borrowing from one car to get, the optimal car that's going to win you the race. But now you have another car that doesn't run, so you got to go find those parts again. So again, it's planning, and planning.
For me, I think it's I don't want to call it the double-edged sword, but it's availability, right? And how, with your purchasing power, how certain are you that what you have locked in will be available to you? But it's also pricing. What we're seeing in the market, suppliers are not necessarily willing to firm up the price. There's a lot of indexing, especially for projects with 26 COD, 27, and yet the buyers for off-takers, they want certainty of the PPA price. So it's an art of how do you lock in not only available supplies, but also at the price that you can really hurdle your project at. So that's I think a second issue that every developer has to tackle.
And that's a good point, because I think even in your documentation, again, trying not to reinvent the wheel every time, but looking for mechanisms that have worked before, that are tried and true, and more importantly, that you've gotten your customers comfortable with, and from a internal risk policy, that works for your company in terms of your risk appetite. It's always a fine balancing act. But again, if you haven't done it before, finding someone that has, and trying to bring those lessons learned into your developments is always key.
Yeah, really not to pile on, but as you're talking, I'm also thinking some of the more recent issues that we are experiencing in some parts of the country with projects execution. It's not just supply chain, it's not just pricing for those, it's really availability of labor, because it is, renewables are everywhere, and that's what we want. And I think the workforce is kind of lagging. There's a lot of EPC providers. Qcells is one of them. We are a turnkey solutions provider. We have modules, we have domestic content in 25, we have development, we have EPC. A lot of developers I know are struggling in finding qualified workforce to meet the demands and the qualifications under the IRA. in the time frames that we need to find and build those projects. All right, let's shift gear a little bit to financing. How has it changed for utility scale renewables over the years from your perspective? And it's up to you to define how many years. Is it last 5 years? Is it last 25 years? I know you've been at it for quite some time.
Yeah, well, having worked in the market now 30 years, I've been on the roller coaster a few times. Here of late, and this is after a long period of very low interest rates, everybody has experienced. It's getting expensive, and again, from a lender perspective, there is a flight to quality in projects, and again, this goes back to our discussion in terms of tax equity. As a project finance lender out in the market, one is able to essentially pick and choose amongst borrowers, pick and choose amongst individual projects, even for a certain borrower that may be a repeat client for a lender, and they are going for the best projects, the best structured projects, where they're assuming the least amount of risk. But the critical thing, and just in terms of development, is because development is such a long cycle in some cases. Right. Your assumptions that were made in a lower interest rate environment no longer hold true. And depending on, again, how quickly you're able to close your financing, you again need to move quickly, and again, not let perfect be the enemy of getting something done. So without trying to haggle over every provision, but making sure that you're moving quickly, you're being commercial about what you're arguing for, and you're not letting your advisors fight over every comment, costing you money, and most importantly, costing you precious time. You need to get to the brass tacks. I always tell clients, focus on the term sheet, spend your time on the term sheet, and get into the details there, because later on, when you go into the documentation and everybody starts arguing about what their assumptions were, again, as you mentioned, what was market, and again, everybody's market is the deal that they closed last time. For financing, it's that much more difficult because you're not doing a financing every day. But it's again, getting those details hammered out early, and once again, making sure that you're approaching your lenders not too early, because they have, again, a limited bandwidth in terms of the number of deals that they could follow, but at least letting them know that your project is in the market, that you're going to be knocking on their door, and that you do kind of a shotgun approach. So you're not just going to one or two and relying on the lender being available to you, but making sure that you're surveying the market and seeing who's going to be available. And you may have to, again, have your option A, B, and C.
From a sponsor perspective, I guess, with such heavy saturation in the market, what makes a project stand out from a lender's perspective?
Well, I think, expectations on reasonableness, and not thinking that you are going to get a project with, zero covenants. In the past, it has been a race to the bottom. Lenders, there was more money out there than there were projects, and there was a competition amongst lenders to get the commitment, bring in the deal, get the fees, as the structuring lender, and then worry about syndication, down the road. At this point, because everything is more expensive, you need to really do your homework as a sponsor, and execution risk and minimizing execution risk is everything. So it may not be the cheapest financing that you go for, because there's always something that wasn't discussed. And it may not have been hidden, but undiscussed aspect of the financing that in the lender's mind, they needed certain protections, and whether those were cash sweeps and certain circumstances and the like to get you that rock bottom pricing. And that wasn't anything you would have ever contemplated as a sponsor. But making sure that you have discussed the details and knowing that the best financing, again, may not be the cheapest, but it's the one that gets done. It's the one that gets your project to COD and ultimately, closes the development cycle on you, as opposed to all the false starts that people sometimes have with lenders where they go down the road or lose 6 months and then find out they're not going to get to a closing because it doesn't meet their criteria, and then they have to go and go knock on another door. But by that point, interest rates could have moved on you. The market could have tightened, as we saw, a little while ago. Some lenders, they're no longer there anymore.
Right. There's so much to cover, and just like we named our webinar "Everything Under the Sun," I feel like we're literally just scratching the surface on all the topics that we could unpack, maybe in a subsequent webinar. But let's switch gear and let's talk a little bit about ESG. How much of ESG mandate is driving renewable procurement, development, and everything that we do? And I am being reminded, I think I posted on LinkedIn last night, it hit home real hard for me. I was driving my teenage daughter back from high school, where she was a freshman, and she said her teacher said, "Enjoy the coolest summer of your life going forward." And so I just was very, very near and dear to my heart, and I actually have to stop and think about it. But anyways, let's talk about ESG, what you see there, how much, what's in the basket in that context.
Well, thankfully, ESG has moved to the forefront in terms of investment and financing. So environmental, social, and governance, trying to change the world with your buying power, trying to change the world with your economic flex, if you will. Right. So, thankfully, having ESG kind of moved to the forefront, and we started seeing that with lenders, we started seeing that with private equity investors, putting it into their mandates, having large billion-dollar investment funds put together with an ESG mandate at their core. So limiting what they could invest in, making sure that they were going to move the needle on ESG principles, and whether that was diversifying the landscape, whether that was projects for the social good, projects for environmental change. All those things, I think, have benefited the renewable energy sector. It's driven a lot more capital to the sector. And again, it's a blessing and a curse. It's turned into a gold rush in some cases, where you had, again, more capital chasing, projects. You saw a number of new teams and platforms being stood up and funded, and funded extremely well. So now you had a lot more competition in the market, which I think for end users was a plus. For developers, I think it was a little bit more difficult, because there you had teams kind of tripping over each other, trying to get the one PPA, because there were 10 projects and one PPA available with a credit-worthy off-taker in some cases. And I've actually have seen, I'm not sure I was supposed to see it, but an actual checklist that a project finance lender used internally. And there, I saw that there were credit committees.
High on the list.
Very high on the list. I mean, in some cases, it was a go, no go in terms of, are you putting your dollars, whether it's a lender or an investor, in an area that, down the road, you're not going to be second guessed on. You're not going to have the headline risk, if you will, by investing in the wrong market, by investing in the wrong technology. And because, people were sensitive to the fact that you did want to use your economic flex to, reverse all the, the issues out there. And, ESG is a pretty wide spectrum of issues, that you were making a difference. So, it is real. it is driving economic decisions. Even how you dress something up and put some of the ESG principles in your pitch materials to investors and your pitch materials to lenders, and you're helping them check the boxes that they're being assessed on down the road, and in some cases even assessed in terms of their individual bonuses. It's important, and thankfully it's moving the market in the right direction. And to your point, in terms of what the younger generation is seeing, it is affecting them. The only thing we leave them is the environment that we developed, and hope that it's better for them than it was for us. And unfortunately, right now, it's working in the other direction. And let's hopefully change it here through the
I
industry.
don't know if you want to share your personal story you briefly shared with me about the inconvenient truth.
Yeah. So right before we started, I was mentioning to Vitaly that my daughter, when she was in elementary school, ended up running out of class. She was in third grade. Inconvenient truth came out, and she only got to the first part where the world was going to end. She thought that the clients at the time that I was working with were the ones destroying the world. And I told her, well, I'm actually also doing, renewable energy. So I told her about wind deals, solar deals, hydrogen deals, or hydroelectric deals that I was working on at the time, geothermal deals. And I ended up being invited by her to show and tell. I took a model of a wind turbine, had to compete with gerbils and snakes. So I think I had an audience of one, and that was my daughter. But she was pretty happy that, at least I was working for, teams that were trying to better the world as opposed to destroy it. But
that's the feeling of satisfaction that we get.
Exactly. You're on the right team.
I know. So we'd be remiss to, and I see Nick coming up, so obviously that means one thing, but we would be remiss not to talk about the role of tribal energy. Anything you want to share with the audience here about the work you're doing, about the work that they're doing, and really how we are all advancing the clean energy transition.
Yeah, and so under the IRA, and I've seen this from both Jigger Shaw and Matt Ferguson, who are running, the Department of Energy's Loan Guarantee Program. They have been incredibly supportive of tribal projects. There are amazing opportunities working with tribes, and I know in the past there have been challenges or perceived challenges in how one is able to site renewable energy projects on tribal lands, but that is being done. I know we have the immediate past vice chair of the Navajo Nation listening here, Byron Lazar, and we also have the executive director of the Native American Tribal Energy Association, and have been invited to DOE meetings around tribes. There is a strong push to try to partner with tribes, seeing how renewable energy developers are able to joint venture with tribes. So I think it's an amazing opportunity. And again, if one is able to figure out how to structure these deals, and there again, you need the right set of advisors to kind of work through the issues and the like. There are amazing benefits to be had. A number of the tribes are located, and we were discussing transmission access next to key transmission points in the market. So it behooves the renewable energy community to look to see where those opportunities are, and how to explore looking for new joint venture partners. And again, when we're looking at ESG, those are the factors that are going to get an additional look, and whether it's from the government, whether it's from lenders, I would encourage people to reach out to the organizations that are out there And if you'd like, reach out to me and I'll make sure to connect you.
One thing, you are absolutely the most probably fantastic connector, networker that I know. Well, maybe I'm second next, but you're very good at connecting people, and I think the entire industry appreciates that. All right, Nick, you don't have to remind me twice. So
I'm here. This is your second warning. Yeah, we have a couple questions I thought we could bring up with the time we have. I'm going to go in here and try to read them out loud. Regarding R&W insurance, we're seeing sellers that want to push buyers to acquire this insurance at their expense. And our view as a buyer is that this is inappropriate and should be a buyer's choice. What are your thoughts?
So it's just a matter of cost. I mean, just like everything else, whose pocket is it going to come out of? And, in some cases, if the buyer is securing the policy, and it's a buyer's policy at the end of the day. But in terms of who's going to shoulder the cost, depending on the perceived value of the asset that's being purchased, and whether it's a portfolio of projects or a single project, the buyer may just simply discount the cost of the insurance from the purchase price. In some cases, and this is done, with a number of issues, whether it's, fees being paid, to government agencies for registration and the like, you kind of split the baby and say, okay, I'll shoulder half the cost and you shoulder half the cost. But what is critical in terms of the cost is to find out early on what the cost is going to be. And what we ended up doing in a number of transactions, and one that we had to close on an expedited basis, was to provide a number of prospective providers of the rep and warranty insurance to our client, the buyer, and then they were able to kind of survey the various providers and get an idea in terms of term, but most important, get an idea in terms of process. So, cost is very important because it's, the real dollars and cents, but knowing who's going to be able to get you close. So just like we discussed in terms of tax equity, just like we discussed in terms of project financing, making sure that you are working with someone that most importantly is going to get you to the finish line is the most important issue, because otherwise you are going to have a failed transaction. Some of the transactions, that are a part of a bidding process, nobody wants to hear about financing outs. No one wants to hear about, hey, I couldn't get my rep and warranty insurance. And there's someone waiting in the wings to buy the project if you're not going to be able to get there on time and get the deal closed. So again, it's figuring out who's going to bear the brunt of the cost, but in most cases it's going to be the buyer.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Nick, I think we have one more question.
Yeah. And I'll paraphrase it, but are you seeing assurance products being applied to renewable deals similar to what's been seen with traditional oil and gas deals?
Insurance products are becoming more and more creative each day. So the one thing that we are seeing is that you do have a number of insurance providers in the market listening to their potential customers and moving in the direction in terms of creativity and the like. There, I think it's always good to sound the market. A lot of times we'll have some of the insurance providers come into our office and try to present their wares to our entire group of partners from across practice groups. And the one thing that I think is becoming more and more critical is weather. Movements in the market and the like as a result of that. So I think sponsors are well served because I know there are a lot of webinars around insurance. But to listen in, see where the market is going, and then see if the cost of the insurance product, is reasonable in terms of what risk they're trying to cover, and whether it makes sense in the market that you're in, because not all insurance products are going to fit every market. And some providers, have focused on certain markets where they see the most activity. So as I mentioned, California, ERCOT, MISO, depending on what's going on in certain markets, that's their focal point, because they know that's where the business is going to come from.
And in some regions, ERCOT specifically, some parts of SPP, because of weather, insurance has been extremely difficult to secure, as well as very costly. That I guess a caution notice to sponsors to really look at the insurance pricing as they are pricing the projects for M&A as well as greenfield development. Nick, you have any other questions?
Just one that came in. It's, you've been practicing for 30 years. What are the top changes you've seen from your start to today, Dino, and Vitaly too? But
internet advent.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, no, and that's critical. I mean, technology has changed everything, at least in terms of being an attorney. You're a service provider, and there are a lot of alternatives in terms of other providers in the market. So client service is job one. Now, with cell phones, you're never away from your desk. Being responsive is critical. Back in the day, when I started in 1993, everything was paper. So even when you were, doing your comments, we had drafting sessions, and then, you made stacks of copies, and, in some cases, if you're in the middle of the deal, you had a courier or a number of couriers, waiting in the lobby, and everybody was trying to catch a flight to go deliver the set of documents. At this point, because everything is electronic, you are constantly turning documents. Documents are being revised up till the moment that they're signed. It's a very fast-paced environment. Again, as a service provider, if you don't service your clients, someone else will. So, being responsive is job one. Also in terms of the makeup of the market, I mean, the one thing that I have seen is more diversity. We talk about ESG principles and the like, but gender diversity, ethnic diversity, the fact that I'm, global chair of a project finance practice, I attribute to, a changing landscape. And I'm very thankful for that. Who you call matters, from a client point of view. So just like ESG, you vote with your dollars. You do the economic flex, but also if you want to see change in the market, depending on what that change is, if you want to see gender diversity, just more diversity in general, the person that you call actually moves the needle. So,
our last webinar was on DEI specifically, and it was very well received. So those of you who haven't listened to it, I would encourage you to listen to that. As a minority partner, I guess maybe advice for people who are starting out either in a legal profession or other consultant service or within renewable as a developer. Any advice you have for folks who really want to, break the glass ceiling and really move up and do well in our industry?
Yeah, at least initially, it's keeping your head down and working those crazy hours and the crazy sacrifices. I know everybody's about work, balance and life balance. Early on, that's very difficult to find. I know it's popular to say, but it's, if you're going to get to where you want to get to, there are no shortcuts. It's going above and beyond. And even as a partner 30 years later, it's, trying to push the envelope. It's, being responsive. It's, thinking of your clients at 3 a.m. and sending them that email of a prospective deal that you think they may be interested in. It's,
I am the direct beneficiary of that.
you are,
Thank you.
and, the other thing is mentorship. And the one thing that I have seen in the renewable energy community is people are always willing to help.
Yeah.
If you reach out, people will reach back. And I've seen that through LinkedIn, even where it says open to work. I know people, reach out to others that they see in the industry and are trying to make those connections. But mentorship is key. Networking is key. And, just fostering a reputation. You're only as good as your reputation. So making sure that people trust you, make sure that, you never burn a bridge, you never make an enemy, be your genuine self. In my case, I've always told everyone I'm the Cinderella man. I'm the last person I would have seen doing this type of work. No one in my background, was a lawyer. My mom has a 3rd grade education, but she is the smartest person I have ever met, raised me as a single mom. I'm the only child. And as we began the webinar, failure was never an option. There was no safety net. And that's, I always tell people, I try to view myself as the most dangerous person in the room because I will never tap out. I may not be the smartest, but you'll have to carry me out on my shield before I give up. And, the projects that I like are those that people say can't get closed or, it can't get done within X period of time because then you throw down the gauntlet and, you need to push to that next level. And, that's where I credit, again, going back to the beginning, people like Ed Fio, that you had to find a way out of the burning building. And as soon as you made it out of that one, there was another burning building, and it was always fun. A lot of adrenaline. I'm a deal junkie. But again, in some cases, the bet the farm deals, the deals that have a lot of hair, those are the fun ones.
Yeah, that's good. That's great advice. Nick, I think we are coming on to the end of the hour that we scheduled. Do you want to close us out? Dino, I want to thank you for really a very informative session with me. And I want to thank people who dialed in, and stay tuned for more.
Yeah, thanks, Vitaly, for hosting today. Thank you, Dean, of course, lending your experience and your knowledge, and especially everyone for joining in today. This is all for you. There's a survey at the end that'll come up after this. Please take a minute to fill it out. Let us know what you thought of this, and what we can bring in the future and what you want to hear about, because that's what we're trying to bring. We have more webinars scheduled already. Follow us on follow Qcells USA on LinkedIn to stay up to date on webinars and the news that we're sharing. And again, thanks so much for being a part of today's session, and we hope you have a great day. We'll see you at RE Plus probably.
Dino,
All
safe
right.
travels.
RE Plus.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for listening in. Be well.